Just a short distance from here along Lake Champlain is the Au Point Wildlife Management Area, which is a haven for bird watchers. Many belong to chapters of the Audubon Society, named in honor of one of the nation's greatest wildlife conservationists, John James Audubon. A week from this Saturday, on April 29th, Mountain Lake PBS will bring you a film that looks at Audubon's love of birds, his beautiful paintings of hundreds of the birds of America, and his deep concern for protecting birds and their habitats, a legacy that still carries on today.
There is a transformational moment in his life, right around 1820, I think, where he just says, I'm committed to this totally crazy idea of painting all the birds in North America in life size. I don't think even Audubon knew how big a job that would end up having to be. I mean, this is not just an artist. This is a guy who's just passionate about these things. He's curious about what they're doing, and he wants to put all that onto paper and let other people enjoy that. That was revolutionary.
Most certainly, Audubon saw ruby-throated hummingbirds in Louisiana. Among the many kinds of media Audubon employed here was one that really sort of knocks your socks off, and that is the application of gold and copper-colored metallic pigments. You can only see them when you tip the paper so that they catch the light. And as everyone knows who has watched ruby-throated hummingbirds, that is exactly the way they look when the light catches their feathers.
That Audubon's real gift to us is awareness. And in that awareness is the beginning of all true conservation.
And joining us this week is John Thaxton from Keene, New York, who is also, like John James Audubon, a bird lover, naturalist, and a painter. Are you a painter as well? And John is also an author. He's written 5 books on birding and wildlife and numerous articles for Adirondack Life, the New York Times, and a column for Adirondack Explorer. John and his wife, Pat, are both members of the board of Northern New York Audubon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
As we'll see in this documentary coming up next weekend, Audubon was really one of America's great painters and one of the nation's first conservationists.
He was born in Haiti. He came to America and he opened a dry goods store. And he rapidly went out of business, spent some time in jail for bankruptcy, and then took his painting stuff and off he went. He traveled all over the country. And these days, with transportation being so good and cars and planes and stuff, if you want to see all the birds he saw and painted, it would take years, because he painted every species. There are about 750. And Audubon saw them all. And I think he's underrated as a painter, because he was really extraordinary. I mean, I minored in college. I minored in art history, so I spent a lot of time looking at paintings and looking at watercolors, and going to museums, and to go down and look at some of his work. It's really very extraordinary.
Although he had no role in the organization that bears his name, one of the founders of the early Audubon Society in the late 1800s was tutored by Audubon's wife, Lucy, and because of his work to protect birds and their habitats, they chose his name, and to this day it does remain synonymous with birds and bird conservation all over the world.
Yes, it does. And the Audubon Society, the National Audubon Society, at one point thought that they had become too diverse and they were getting involved in too many things, forests, and they decided to refocus and be about birds, rather than start doing the kinds of things the Sierra Club was doing and the Wilderness Society was doing and so forth. And so that's been, I say, probably been about 8 years that Audubon is really focusing much more on birds than it had.
How many chapters are there worldwide?
Oh, geez, I don't know.
Hundreds?
Yeah.
And
I think there's 57 Audubon chapters in New York State. Northern New York Audubon, we have maybe 1,000 members. And some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. New York City has probably 14,000 members. You go to New York City, you wouldn't think it's like Audubon territory, but we used to live in the city.
And one of your books is about where to go birding
Where to
in New
go
York.
birding in and around New York City, and in Central Park. It's like world class. I mean, it's just that island of green in the middle of Manhattan. And you go there, and all these birders are there. And when there's a lot of birders, they find the birds. And since there are cell phones, word gets around. It's a great place to go birding.
Here in Northern New York, your chapter here, obviously there's the love of birding. What else does the chapter do? What is your mission?
Our mission is to protect habitats and ecosystems. And in addition to birding initiatives, for example, we handle and sponsor a couple of bird festivals, one at the Paul Smith's Visitors Interpretive Center in first weekend in June, and one in Hamilton County. And for those, we lead talks, we lead trips, we fund keynote speakers who will come and give an address at each of these things. And we lead a lot of field trips, and we give out grants to researchers, but for education and for research. For example, we gave a grant this year to the Wildlife Conservation Society to do an inventory of the birds in the Champlain Hills, the lower Adirondacks, a suite of species that are interesting because a lot of them are not in the higher areas, at the higher elevations. And it demonstrated that there's a lot of species moving into the Adirondacks from further south. And it's something we also see on Christmas bird counts. Red-bellied woodpecker, for example, was unheard of 10 years ago, and now they're every place. And it's a temperature thing.
Climate change.
Yes, and so we fund research into climate change as well. And if you took a look at list of some of the grants that we do and we've funded, you would think we probably had lost our minds because some of them sound way over the top. You know, we did a study. We funded a study of the set of the alleles on the second chromosome of the white-throated sparrow. It's not exactly television stuff, but it's a fascinating bird, and it's one of the signature North Country birds.
And you fund a lot of projects. I mean, thousands of dollars a year.
Yeah, we've given out, in the past 10 years, we've probably given out about $125,000. And we funded interns at the Wild Center and at the Adirondack Wildlife Refuge, and we funded research into white-throated sparrows. We funded research into exurban development and its impact on ovenbirds. You've probably never seen an ovenbird, but you've heard one, I'm sure. It's the bird that goes, teacher, teacher, teacher. Loud as can be, but they're very secretive and you seldom see them. And all kinds of research like that, it's a fun thing to do. And we've been getting more and more requests to do more and more research, and it's terrific. I mean, we get money from the Joseph and Joan Cullman Foundation every year, and we give it all away, and I think it's had an impact on ecosystems in the North Country, and it's very much the mission of Northern New York Audubon, to enhance the ecosystem and the study of birds and what birds depend on.
You talk about the warming temperatures. Are we seeing a number of species that are moving into the northern Adirondacks that wouldn't have in the past?
Yes, and for example, on a Christmas bird counts, I mentioned red-bellied woodpeckers, which are new for the past 5 years or so, as well as Carolina wrens. These are more southern species. And another phenomenon that we've been noticing is that some species are migrating in elevation. And one of the signature North Country Adirondack birds is the Bicknell's thrush, which lives on the mountaintops. It only breeds above 3,500 feet. And the Swainson's thrush is moving up and coming into the same territory as the Bicknell's thrush because of warming temperatures. And it's not good for the Bicknell's thrush. And it's happening with all kinds of other species that should be lower down. They're moving up to get cooler. It's actually very alarming. I don't know. I've seen it. You know, we've been leading bird trips up Whiteface Mountain, my wife and I, for the past 10 years for one of the festivals. And we never saw Swainson's thrushes near the summit of Whiteface Mountain. Now they outnumber the Bicknell's thrushes 10 to 1. Yeah, it's clear. It's clear as a bell.
And we've been hearing for a number of years about the concerns about the Bicknells and the decline in their habitat. Estimates as much as 98% of their habitat.
It's way down. And the bird only breeds in New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Quebec, and the Maritime provinces. And the entire, 99.9% of the species winters in the Dominican Republic, which is scary because a really bad storm in the Dominican Republic could wipe out the whole population. And so it's probably the most endangered, I think definitely the most endangered songbird in North America.
And I know for years there has been a push to get it put on the endangered species list,
Yes.
and it's been delayed and delayed. Is a final decision on protection finally coming soon?
Not that I've heard. And, I don't know why there would be a reluctance to make it an endangered species, but there is. I mean, I don't know how, those gears move very slowly.
And while there's the concern about the bicknails and others, over the years there were different concerns and different threats before climate change. Certainly there was acid rain for a number of years and decades. Before that, of course, there was DDT and other pesticides.
Sure.
And we have seen over the years, fortunately, a rebound of a number of the species that were threatened by that.
Yes,
Eagles and ospreys and loons.
Loons are a remarkable comeback story. In fact, what they're finding, we've funded quite a few research initiatives on loons who are they're almost doing too well. I mean, we set up some cameras at loon nesting sites, and they discovered on a couple of cameras a loon coming in to a nest and killing the young to take the nest for itself. The reason being, there are too many loons in the Adirondacks, and the population has hit saturation levels.
Every once in a while, we'll get a visitor, a bird that doesn't normally live here, somehow ends up here. A couple of winters ago, it was the snowy owl, and this winter, the great gray owl, and a few spotted in Messina, and then one closer to you in Keene.
3 miles from my house.
And it brings birders from around the country.
It brings a lot of birders. I mean, we went there a couple of times to see the bird, and at one time there was probably 20 cars on Stilesbrook Road. This is a dirt road. And hundreds of people came each week, hundreds of people came. In fact, the town supervisor, stopped me in Stewart's and said that, hey, John, is there a way we keep this bird here all the time? I was saying, yeah, but I don't think birds are going to flock here to see it in a cage. But it was really quite a thing.
And that brings up a good point. Birding is big tourism.
Very much so.
And it's good for the Adirondacks and communities.
It is. It is. When we have our birding festivals, the hotels in the area, we have them in the first week of June. Nobody comes to the Adirondacks in the first week of June, and but the hotels will fill up.